everyone. I'm Katie Rich. I'm the host of the Prestige Junkie podcast. If you love award season or simply want to understand what's going on between now and the Oscars, become a paid subscriber to Prestige Junkie After Party. I'll be bringing in special guests to talk about insights from fall festival season and beyond to help you understand why some of us truly think the Oscars are as important as the Super Bowl. Go to prestigejunkie.afterparty.substack.com and subscribe now.
It's still a huge promotional platform for all things Disney across all day parts, and that is a huge piece too.
Yeah, he's very ingrained in the fabric of Disney and ABC. It's hard to imagine a Disney ABC without him, honestly.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. It's the morning of Thursday, September 18th, and I'm your host, Elaine Lowe, staff writer at The Ankler and author of the series Business Newsletter, here with Natalie Jarvie of Like and Subscribe. We've got a special episode of The Pod today. We'd actually recorded an entire other episode that we've put on hold for now, so we can talk about the news that Jimmy Kimmel Live has been pulled from ABC's airwaves indefinitely, which followed FCC Chair Brendan Carr talking to a podcast and suggesting that the federal agency would take action against the Disney broadcaster if they didn't. We'll have the Wake Up's Sean McNulty, series business reporter Leslie Goldberg, and Prestige Junkies Katie Rich, and we'll have some new reporting on this story. But first, a quick rundown of what happened. So on Monday night's episode of Kimmel's Late Night Show, amid his regular thumping of Trump during opening monologues, which is nothing new, Kimmel said this.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Then FCC Chair Brendan Carr went on an episode of right-wing podcaster Benny Johnson's show on Wednesday and said,
we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
And then Nexstar issued a statement saying that it would preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live for, quote, the foreseeable future, beginning with tonight's show, and that it strongly objected to recent comments from Kimmel concerning the killing of Charlie Kirk and would replace the show with other programming in its ABC-affiliated markets. And very shortly after that, ABC made this statement, just a 7-word statement that said, quote, Jimmy Kimmel Live will be preempted indefinitely. So we're going to give you a play-by-play of what happened behind the scenes and look ahead to what this means for Hollywood. But first, let's have Sean McNulty on to talk about Nexstar's role in this. So Nexstar, as well as Sinclair TV Group, which has called upon Jimmy Kimmel to, quote, issue a direct apology to Charlie Kirk's family, is holding his show off their airwaves indefinitely. Right, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, that's what spurred this. I mean, the comments were made, essentially Monday, the show records, this in the afternoon. It aired Monday night. Tuesday went by, I saw nothing at all. This reading that I do and scanning every day, there's nothing, maybe there were some things in the other parts of the social media world, but until Brendan Carr went on this interview, went in the podcast and did this interview, this is what spurred this, and Disney's reacting to that and reacting to these affiliates pulling the show from their lineups. And this is Nexstar and Sinclair, two of the 3 largest owners of television stations in this country.
Right. How many stations do Sinclair and Nexstar each have? Because Sinclair is ABC's largest single affiliate.
Yeah, they have 40 stations affiliated with ABC. Nexstar is next. I believe it's the 32 stations. Again, I'm not sure what the percentage of the reach of that is in the country. Obviously, ABC owns its biggest stations in New York and LA and so forth. But still, you're talking about 70 stations out of, about maybe 200 markets in the country. So you're talking about a third of your footprint there. So it is significant. This is also not 1999 where this is a little more of a standoff where there's the online distribution is much larger footprint here. And Kimmel does have 20 million subscribers, over 20 million subscribers on YouTube. His, monologues typically gather around 2 to 3 million views each day. Typically, this one in question was only at about 3.6 million so far here recording on Thursday. So the linear ratings are about 1.8 million into the second quarter this year for the show. So that's about your size comps there, Elaine.
So, Sean, you bring up the fact that he has this really big online presence. The affiliates could have opted to preempt him, but ABC could have chosen to still have his show go on, right?
100%. ABC can do what it wants. The stations are free to carry. This has happened. There's precedents in history about this, about affiliates, not, choosing to carry NYPD Blue when they had an infamous nudity issue, things like that. So the network still airs the show. It's just that the affiliates, as a part of their agreement, can agree not to do it, not to carry these shows. So that's what we're seeing here, Natalie. So yes, the show could have aired throughout the country, and it could have gone up on YouTube the next day as it normally would.
But it didn't.
But it
ABC
did not.
ultimately decided to preempt the show as well.
Yes, and they've made no comment as to why. You can make your assumption again. This all happened not after the show aired on Monday night. This happened after the FCC came in line and after the affiliates made their move saying they would no longer air the show or would pull the show for now.
Right. This was 2 whole days later. And, you point out, Sean, in your edition of The Wake Up this morning, that there are 2 pending deals that are happening as all of this is unfolding. There's Nexstar's pending acquisition of Tegna, and there's also an ESPN NFL deal, and Disney is obviously the parent company of ESPN.
Yeah, there's actually a third deal. Disney also has the Fubo deal pending, which was the timeline was to have it closed by end of year or first quarter of next year. So that's actually sooner. The NFL deal was more probably later part of 2026. And that's, look, we're all reading between the lines here, but yes, and to be clear, those Disney deals are not FCC, don't need FCC approval, but they are in front of the DOJ, which, count your government agencies as you like in terms of, the Trump factor here. But the Nexstar Group, which is the largest station group in the country, is in the midst of a deal to buy the third largest group called Tegna. And that deal does require FCC approval. The FCC has long been a fan of expanding station groups, so a little more favorable on that account. But, obviously Nexstar doing this puts it more in their favor, you would say. And perhaps Brendan Carr, you can make that speculation, certainly. But yeah, 3 pending deals before the Trump administration on this.
And, it seems notable that FCC Chair Carr also said on Johnson's pod shortly after he made the comments about Kimmel that, he pointed to a, quote, desperate irrelevance of essentially Kimmel and legacy TV broadcasters, and also pointed immediately after that to the defunding of PBS and NPR and the exits of Stephen Colbert from his late night show at CBS, something that the official framing is it's a financial decision. And also he pointed to Joy Reid and MSNBC and Terry Moran from ABC exiting their posts as well. So, if we're talking about things contextually and reading between the lines, I think it's notable that he's grouping all of those things together.
100%. We should note also Kimmel's contract is up next year. So this is also happening in the background. Kimmel has alluded to maybe ending his run at some point, but perhaps after this contract. No real conversation around that, but certainly one other element here, Elaine, to keep in mind about what's happening, especially considering how the Colbert whole deal went down back this summer.
Yeah, well, I can't help but look at this and think we've lost Colbert. We're losing Colbert soon. Kimmel's now off the air. It really means that we've just got the NBC guys left in late night now.
On broadcast TV, yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of a huge chilling effect for late night and late night comedians who tend to get a little political. And I would say Kimmel was not the most political of the bunch. He really kind of towed the line for the most part.
Yeah, of the 3, I'd say Colbert probably is the most out there. I'd say Kimmel's probably next and Fallon, probably Seth before Fallon there. But yeah, this is, and look, if you go back in time, Nixon had problems with Carson back in the day. Lyndon Johnson had problems with some TV hosts as well, talking about his administration. So this is a time-tested thing here a bit, where this is just taking a much more radical manifestation of this, where it's unprecedented. It's as unprecedented, it's alarming. You can use any word you want here about this decision, and we'll see what Disney's going to do. Disney, again, has made Elaine just said, a 7-word statement. Not a lot here so far. We're still waiting to hear more from the company itself. They've said nothing other than the 7 words you said, and that's really not saying anything.
Although, who has said something? President Trump, posting online that, quote, he says, quote, that leaves Jimmy and Seth 2 total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC. 3 exclamation marks.
Yeah.
A lot less subtlety there.
Yeah, as it's shockingly so. But look, this is all happening in the landscape of the changing business model, I should say. The Colbert situation, was maybe depends how you want to see that situation, but late night TV ratings going down, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be more curious if, this is playing a devil's advocate here, but it's like you're going to have Colbert and Kimmel out of the realm here. Is there an online business to be had here, Natalie, where, it could be a whole step forward, another evolution of the online space in terms of doing these shows just for digital audiences, people have been clamoring, where is the left podcast? Where is the left media rights? And if these guys technically left the broadcast realm and made something in the digital space, that would be interesting to see. Obviously, pure speculation, Natalie, at this point, but just something that's happening in the background here as well.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Kimmel yet about what he plans to do.
Yes.
So, we will see. That certainly is an option that didn't exist even a decade ago, that they could essentially find a way to broadcast probably stream a smaller version of these shows on YouTube or, in podcast form. That comes with some challenges too in this moment, but certainly there's not a network that can decide to pull them off the air.
Yeah, not FCC regulated and all the other things that are happening here. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for your insights, Sean. Now with us here is series business reporter Leslie Goldberg, and I understand you have the TikTok of what went down yesterday at ABC after Nexstar made its decision.
Yeah, it sounds honestly like everyone that I've spoken to internally says it's just been a very, very heavy time at Disney right now. Obviously, Kimmel is the face of ABC, former Oscar host for the network, long relationships there.
He's at every upfronts for them.
Oh my God, that's the best part of upfronts is his roast of his own network. It's, they know what they have in Kimmel and they trust him. And this is a big, big issue here for them and trying to salvage that relationship.
Yeah, he's a beloved figure there. So tell me what went down, who was meeting, what kind of conversations were had?
Yeah, so as I understand it, obviously, Kimmel recorded the monologue in Monday's show. Tuesday's show aired with no issue, and then the head of the FCC went on a right-wing podcast and pressured Disney to take action. What's unclear to me right now is when ABC started getting calls from advertisers who were concerned and affiliates, if that came before or after Carr's appearance on the podcast. But either way, meetings were held throughout the day Wednesday with Disney executives, including CEO Bob Iger, head of Unscripted Rob Mills, who started his career working for Jimmy Kimmel Live, Craig Erwick, and Dana Walden. Walden, of course, one of the possible successors to Bob Iger. Ultimately, what I'm told is that Walden and Iger made the decision, and Walden is the one who called Jimmy to talk him through. And, look, both sides, as I understand it, want to come to some sort of resolution here. Kimmel had planned to go on stage when the show started taping.
And it tapes around, 4:30 p.m. Pacific?
Yeah, that was a big issue as well. That's honestly what seems to have really forced Disney's hand here was not just the affiliates pulling Kimmel, but also the time that he was going to record. Basically, time ran out as Walden and Kimmel were going back and forth trying to figure out a way forward, a path forward. What I hear is that Kimmel did not want to apologize for his remarks, but rather wanted to clarify them. And what one source told me is if he had gone on stage and said what he had planned, effectively, he possibly would have doubled down on those remarks. And the fear is if he went on the air and said those things, that there would have been no coming back from that. So that's effectively what we understand as the TikTok on Wednesday. Both sides, I'm told, Kimmel wants to return, allegedly wants to return. ABC and Disney executives obviously love this man. He's been there for decades. His contract is up next year. And he's obviously talked in the past about retiring, but both sides really do hope that there is a path forward. More meetings are expected to take place today. We know he's going to be off the air until at least Monday at the earliest. But yeah, they have to figure out a path forward. And they're not going to try and censor him from everything that I've been told. But the hope is that he can continue to be the comedian that he is. He's not going to stop biting at Trump. He's not going to stop biting at Disney. But there has to be some sort of mediation in terms of how he addressed the Charlie Kirk situation here.
I do wonder what that path forward will look like once you make the decision to, take someone off the air, getting them back on the air. Seems like a big hurdle to figure out, especially if, based on what you've heard, Leslie, Kimmel doesn't want to apologize. There will be a lot of scrutiny on him coming back when and if he does.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very precarious situation for everyone involved. Obviously, Disney has the NFL deal with ESPN that they need approval from the Trump administration for. The affiliates have their own thing, as Sean got into, of course. So it's, from my vantage point, it continues to all be about money at the end of the day.
And, you reported on Stephen Colbert and the decision to retire his show at the end of the year next spring. And that was, the official statement is that was a financial decision. Like, what degree do you think that may have a role in here with Kimmel when people are calling something a financial decision? Or, obviously late night shows are not exactly huge, revenue boosters for a studio or a network anymore.
No, but YouTube clips are, right, Natalie? And as far as we understand, the monologue in question here is still available to watch on YouTube. And that's where a lot of revenue comes from for Jimmy Kimmel Live. And that was a big reason for Colbert's cancellation was he's not on YouTube in the way that his successors, the Jimmys are, Seth Meyers, et cetera. And that's a big revenue generating area. And if ABC and Disney want to continue those conversations with Jimmy, this is still a revenue generating show. If it wasn't, it would be long gone. What's more is it's also a platform for all of Disney's assets, right? Like as someone who, from back in the day covered Grey's Anatomy and Scandal, I remember the days where every single week Kimmel, after a big episode, had an actor or Shonda Rhimes on as a guest from Grey's Anatomy, from Scandal. It's still a huge promotional platform for all things Disney across all day parts. And that is a huge piece too.
He always has the Bachelor contestants on. Usually he has the first interview with whoever the Bachelor or Bachelorette has chosen at the end of that show. Yeah, he's very ingrained in the fabric of Disney and ABC. It's hard to imagine a Disney ABC without him, honestly.
Absolutely.
And I think also bears noting here, too, that both the WGA, both the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, which represents performers, have both come out with pretty strong denunciations of what's happened.
Absolutely. The WGA's statement was incredibly strong. And, I've heard from a lot of agents in the comedy side, a couple of executives who all are comparing this to McCarthyism. It's a very, very scary time. And the hope is that this is not continuing to set a precedent. Look, I emailed the showrunner of The Handmaid's Tale last night for his take because, things feel pretty bleak from where I stand. And his email back was, quote, "Don't let the bastards grind you down," if that tells you anything about the state of the world that we're living in right now.
And seems to be a consensus among the Hollywood set who are largely supporting Kimmel right now.
Absolutely. I haven't seen anything, from anyone in Hollywood really who doesn't see this as a larger issue about free speech.
And, let's talk a little bit, too, about what will be airing instead of Kimmel. Sinclair says that they are going to broadcast a Charlie Kirk tribute on their stations. What do you make of that, Leslie?
Can I curse on this show? I don't know. I mean, it's not for me to really judge what they're going to air, but it obviously, to me, it's just, these are affiliate groups that need approval from a Trump administration. So, of course, they're going to play into that.
I wonder about this from a ratings standpoint. Already late night doesn't pull the ratings it used to. And now you have, original late night show being preempted at that time. Certainly it can't be good for ABC's ratings to have whatever will end up running in its slot.
Who knows if ABC and Disney will have to do any buybacks or give any other free time to advertisers in the future, because obviously they're airing repeats when advertisers paid to air against original episodes. So that's another possible financial hit for Disney during all of this. But the bigger issue is Kimmel's future and if he can come back from this and what that creative relationship looks like going forward, because he has had creative freedom to say what he wants on that show. There is an ingrained trust there that's been there for a very, very long time with a lot of the executives, especially with Rob Mills, who heads unscripted and alternative for Disney. So what happens next? How Dana Walden and Jimmy Kimmel can possibly work together to figure out a path for him to come back where Kimmel can continue to be the comedian and the man that he is while still respecting a boundary that it seems like Disney needs to put on him.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Leslie. I'm sure you'll have more reporting on this in the weeks to come. Certainly really interesting timing following everything that just happened with Colbert.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Rich. I'm the host of the Prestige Junkie podcast. If you love award season or simply want to understand what's going on between now and the Oscars, become a paid subscriber to Prestige Junkie After Party, I'll be bringing in special guests to talk about insights from fall festival season and beyond to help you understand why some of us truly think the Oscars are as important as the Super Bowl. Go to prestigejunkiefterparty.substack.com and subscribe now.
Next up, we have Prestige Junkies Katie Rich. Katie, Jimmy Kimmel is a 4-time former Oscar host. Is this the first time we've seen a former host so directly under such federal pressure in this way? It seems highly unusual.
That's a great question. I do think Jane Fonda might have hosted one of the ceremonies in the 70s back when they would have like 4 or 5 people at once. So, Hollywood has been known to be in the crosshairs of the government. But in terms of someone who is like both an Oscar host and just kind of like widely regarded as a pretty like inoffensive TV presence, like I don't think anyone thought of Jimmy Kimmel as a firebrand until all of this happened. So I do think that part of it is pretty unusual, especially since he is an ABC host. The Oscars are on ABC. ABC is who folded. It's all pretty complicated.
And you think about the Emmys, which just happened last weekend. I mean, Stephen Colbert got such a wonderfully warm embrace from the audience when he went up. And Kimmel is somebody who had actually campaigned for his rival at the Emmys, putting up a billboard around town saying that he was going to vote for Colbert.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have a creative community in Hollywood, and with the WGAs, I think you guys have just talked about like a lot of creatives are really going to step up and want to defend Jimmy Kimmel. A lot of them were in the room there at the Emmys. Like possible some of the ABC execs who made this decision were there in the room applauding Colbert and then, had their moment to step up and really failed to do so. But, given the response that's been around Colbert, no one really has the ability to do much about that. That's, Paramount Skydance making their financial decision. But I am curious if some of that energy can now be sent as blowback back to ABC, and some people with some power there and some levers to pull might be able to do something.
I think about, both Colbert and Kimmel have been doing this for a long time. Kimmel has talked about how, he might be ready to be done hosting late night, and just how different now we will talk about their legacies as a result of these last few months. I mean, up until this summer, the conversation around late night was that it was, kind of dying. People weren't watching it, wasn't as relevant. And, really seeing the response to Colbert on Sunday night reminded me just how impactful those shows are for people in Hollywood and viewers. And I think it's reminded everyone that, these are shows that, have a real place in TV history and in culture and setting the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, this is getting into your field, Natalie, but I don't think anyone thinks either Colbert or Kimmel will be silenced by not being on these shows. There's obviously so many platforms available for people. Conan O'Brien, I think, is as visible as he's ever been, hosting his podcast. A lot of right-wing people are very familiar with ecosystems of media you can set up outside of these major networks. So, if this is somehow the end of Jimmy Kimmel, and I think that would be an incredible shame for the format of that show and of late night, but I think he will have plenty more to say after all this.
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to hearing him finally talk about this, when he's ready or when he feels able. And Colbert too. I mean, he's still got some time before he has to think about what's next for him. So we'll see what both of those hosts kind of put into place for their future. But absolutely, between YouTube and the podcast ecosystem, there are places that these hosts can go to say what they want and not have an ABC or a CBS making a decision about whether or not they get to stay on the air. I will say, these platforms have had their own issues around content moderation and free speech. YouTube, several years ago, did start to moderate what they described as hate speech. But, generally speaking, these platforms like to be a lot less hands-on in what they allow on their platform, because once they start making decisions about what is and isn't allowed, then they start to get into a territory of they're not really an agnostic tech platform, they're a media company, and most of them don't really want to be treated like media companies.
But what if they're trying to get a merger approved and the federal government starts pressuring them? Is that when they start acting like media companies? Because that seems to be the trend here.
I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, these companies have all had their moment in the spotlight with the government. And I will even note that the U.S. House Committee has summoned the CEOs of Discord, Twitch, Reddit, all to testify about online radicalization in the last few days. So, these companies are not escaping scrutiny from the government right now.
I think about the cultural impact of late night. Natalie, you were talking earlier about how at the beginning of the summer, the conversation was more like, well, who's really watching late night anymore? And like a lot of us just sort of watch it in clips, like we've talked about, like on Instagram or TikTok or something. And I forget who said this, but comedy, late night comedy is really such a way that we process the day's news. And what will we do now that two of those major players are off the air, and especially amid what seems like direct political pressure?
Yeah. I mean, I think even if we're processing it through watching their clips the next morning, it's still kind of a monoculture way of saying, like, this is the thing that everybody is talking about. And, I talked to some of the team behind Seth Meyers' show earlier this year, part of their Emmy campaign, and kind of asked them, like, how do you figure out what everybody is talking about? There really is no such version of it. And they're really doing their best to kind of filter it and translate it and put it out for still a pretty broad audience. We're all sitting here in our respective media silos, and Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel were among the few people who would cross over to those different levels, which is then why the government gets so mad about them, because they have that platform. And, I know I'm saying that this, them not being on a broadcast network won't keep them quiet, but it does splinter things off even further than where we are now. And I think we're all realizing recently, if not earlier, that being in our little media silos is not serving us all that well these days.
Yeah, I mean, it is true that this is how people process the day's news. But I would argue that younger people maybe aren't processing it this way, and they're processing it with a whole host of different kinds of creators and comedians who are YouTube first, TikTok first, Twitch first, and in many cases, to Katie's point, are a lot more political and a lot more clear about where they fall around some of these issues. And it will silo people further into these kind of groups where you're listening to like-minded people talk about what's going on in the world.
And, our own Richard Rushfield has written about this today, as we all expected he would. And let me just quote from you a little bit from his column about Kimmel. He's saying, how about saying, you don't want him on broadcast? Fine, we'll move the show to Hulu and help your crummy airwave stations die a little faster. This is Richard speaking. And beyond Disney, here's an excellent moment for Netflix's Ted Sarandos to show once again why he has run laps around the studio for the past decade. In public, at least, Ted has been notably less obsequious than others in the media and tech orbit. How about hiring Kimmel away, like today? I mean, this certainly presents an opportunity for streamers like Netflix who, have the reach and have the financial bandwidth to take something like that on.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about monoculture, like who has the attention of everybody? Netflix is certainly the answer to one of those. And I think the big cancel culture question is lingering over all of this. And I think about how Ted Sarandos stood by Dave Chappelle, even when a lot of people were calling for him not to continue making things on Netflix because of some comments he made about trans people. So if Ted Sarandos really wants to stand by both sides of that coin that he's really stood there with, I think bringing in Kimmel is exactly a way to prove that.
I will point out that, several years ago when Hassan Minhaj had a show on Netflix, Patriot Act, Netflix did pull an episode of his show in Saudi Arabia. They left it up on YouTube, but still, Netflix has also, had to wade into these kinds of issues and discussions in the past, and we'll see whether a place like Netflix would ultimately want to stand up for free speech here in this instance and give a platform to, a more political comedian in this moment in time.
And as unprecedented as a lot of this feels, and certainly a lot of it is, it's also, not the first time that a late night host has been taken off the airwaves for something he said. Obviously Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect was canceled by ABC in 2002 after he made some critical statements after 9/11, and he was replaced by a man named Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, there's an LA Times article from that time where they're basically like, he's a guy from The Man Show. What's he going to do with a late night platform? Which I think a lot of people have talked about this, about Jimmy Kimmel really transforming from kind of like the goofy Man Show guy into, I think he's been taking a stand a lot on his show, and increasingly in recent years, as much as I said in the beginning, he's a pretty genial presence on TV. So it really kind of tells you how much the arc of history can take you in unexpected directions sometimes. It's also worth noting that Bill Maher, his show is pulled off of ABC, but he continues to be on television. He's basically never left television. So
it hasn't stopped him from speaking out.
No, I don't think anyone has successfully silenced Bill Maher in all this time. And also, his show got canceled in June of 2002, and he had made those statements a couple weeks after 9/11. So that was a real slow motion thing. And as far as I know, no direct pressure from a branch of the government, which is what we're looking at here.
Right. And, Natalie, when we're talking about the future of late night and what that looks like right now, I mean, there aren't the same FCC regulations that YouTubers and podcasters are subject to, but, do you think that political creators have anything to be concerned about, should be second guessing themselves about as they see what's happening to Jimmy Kimmel right now?
I definitely think that they are asking those questions right now as well. I did go check out what Hassan Piker has said in the last few days. He was set to debate Charlie Kirk before his assassination. And so he's been, speaking a lot in the press about, kind of this moment in history and how he's responding to it. He said he's going to continue to post and share his opinions online, but he definitely did point out the government scrutiny over platforms like Discord and Twitch. So the bigger question, I think, for a lot of these creators is not whether their content would be pulled off of a platform, but whether advertisers would want to advertise against that content. Already, a lot of, I would say, people who really deal more in kind of like the lifestyle influencing space, are constantly kind of dealing with, do I say something political on a platform like Instagram and risk angering an advertiser or potential advertiser, or do I take a stand? And I just think that those kinds of calculations are going to become, kind of more prevalent and more real for a lot of creators moving forward.
And we do have one quick update live as we're taping this right now from Leslie Goldberg, who says that a source told her that Disney didn't start getting calls from affiliates and advertisers until Wednesday. So this is 2 days after Kimmel's show aired, and this was after FCC Chair Brendan Carr went on Benny Johnson's podcast. So it really wasn't until then that Disney started hearing from advertisers.
I can add breaking news from my own inbox, too. I had a little bit less of a scoop, but the Producers Guild has put out their own statement on their Instagram, basically criticizing, it doesn't name Kimmel by name, but it says it condemns censorship and stands with all who exercise their First Amendment rights. So the Hollywood guilds seem to be getting organized. I did reach out to the Academy to ask them if they would have anything to say, given their relationship with ABC and Kimmel. I have not yet heard anything back, but it wouldn't surprise me if they wound up putting out probably a pretty vague statement, but I imagine they might want to say something.
It strikes me as interesting that the PGA will put out a statement that doesn't even necessarily name Kimmel by name. I mean, sort of talk about taking a stance without really trying to wade too much into it. And I say this without having actually seen it. This is the first I've heard of this PGA statement. But I mean, how tepid or how strong do we feel like the response is going to be here when there is very much so a sense of what are we allowed to say, as we have all of these conversations around free speech and what that actually means?
Yeah. I mean, there's the comment on Instagram that surveyed me first is someone saying, you seem more upset that Jimmy Kimmel lost his job than Charlie Kirk losing his life. So the amount of arguing and twisting of your words that can happen right now is pretty remarkable. So, yeah, I think if I were in that position, I'd try to speak pretty vaguely as well.
Well, any last thoughts?
The Smothers Brothers also got their show pulled off the air when it was a top 10 show on CBS in 1969 because Richard Nixon, not because, it seems unclear the reasons for it. They were very political. They were criticizing the war. They had like Pete Seeger and Joan Baez on their show, and eventually CBS decided enough was enough. So I'm the kind of person who takes some comfort in knowing that history repeats itself and that humans are humans and things like this have happened before. Not that we are not in bad times now, but there were probably worse times in human history to be alive. And so, if it was happening in 1969, it's happening now. Hopefully we can find a way out of this moment like we did back then.
That was very nice and positive, Katie. Thank you for giving us some uplifting perspective today.
All right. Well, Richard Rushfield, the OG angler, he's got some strong feelings about this and will not hold back when he talks to the Bulwark's Jonathan V. Lastiday at his own Substack Live video, The Rushfield Lunch. So be sure to look out for that there and his column at theangler.com. This is a wrap on this week's very special episode of The Angler Podcast. Visit theangler.com to subscribe to all of our newsletters and pods to stay ahead of what's happening in the industry. And you can always email us with your hot takes, podcast at theangler.com. You can also follow us at The Angler on all major social platforms. Thanks so much to Sean McNulty, Natalie Jarvie, Leslie Goldberg, and Katie Rich. And thank you all for listening. I'm Elaine Lowe. See you next week.